Hi, everyone. Welcome, Dickinsonians. It's so great to be here with you tonight. We have over 175 people registered for tonight's program, which is amazing. And I want to extend a special welcome to all of you who are in reunion years and celebrating Alumni Week, which would have been Alumni Weekend, but thanks to technology, we're still able to gather. So welcome. For those of you who aren't as familiar with the technology of this platform, I thought something that might be a fun icebreaker so you can get familiar with the chat feature. If you want to find your chat box at the top right hand of the screen and let us know where you're signing in from, where you're quarantining from or where your home is located, we'd love to hear where you're at. And then at the end, you can use that chat box to submit questions to our panelists. So we'll do that in the last 5 or 10 minutes of the program. Just a quick introduction. I really want to leave the full hour for our panelists, but my name is Andrea Britton. I work in the Office of Advancement as a development officer, which basically means that I spend time in a few major cities getting to know our alumni personally and connecting them to the college, keeping them connected to the college, and encouraging them to give back. And giving back you can do in so many different ways. These panelists, this is a group of alumni who have given back so much to Dickinson, and we are extremely grateful. I mean, Lauren served on the Alumni Council. Ed came to campus last spring to, give a lecture, to speak in classes. Eric's been really involved with admissions. I mean, these folks are just really, really generous with their time and talents, and we're really grateful for that. So I want to turn it over to the panelists. I'm just going to introduce them by name, and then I'm going to allow them 5 or 6 minutes to share a little bit about maybe what they studied at Dickinson, how they ended up in LA and in the arts and entertainment industry, and maybe some of the projects that they've worked on or are currently working on. So I'm joined tonight by Eric Garcia, class of 1990. Give us a wave. Hi, Eric. Ed Ricourt, class of 95. Hi, Ed.
Hello.
Hi. Lauren Ashley Smith, class of 06. Hey, Lauren. And Alex Carver, class of 95. So welcome, everybody. All right, so Lauren, if you don't mind, I'm going to have you kick us off. If you wouldn't mind taking 5 or 6 minutes, tell us a little bit about what you did at Dickinson, and then what brought you to LA, and a little bit about your career and what you've worked on.
Definitely. Thank you, Andrea, for having me. Hi, everyone. I'm so happy to be here. I am class of 2006. As she said, I was an American Studies major. And while I was at Dickinson, my focus in American Studies was on the media, specifically the representation of Black women in media. So I find it very perfect that I now am the head writer and co-executive producer of a show called A Black Lady Sketch Show, which is filled with Black women in media. So I felt very prepared for this moment. While I was at Dickinson, I did things like Run With It. I worked in the Office of Diversity Initiatives, as it was called. But I really was passionate about getting a liberal arts degree. And so I didn't major in, didn't want to go to school where I had a communications degree or whatever, but I really credit American Studies for teaching me how to write, how to think, how to, look at something and find the important parts of the story and weave a narrative based on, how I read it, which served me well as a late night writer, which I did for a lot of years. So the way that I got into television was I was at a scholarship luncheon at Dickinson in the social hall. And I happened to be sat at a table with Amy Nuyakis, who is a trustee of the college. And we hit it off because she had gone to Cameroon and I had gone to Cameroon. And she was so generous with her time and her resources. And she, asked me what did I want to do in my career. And I told her, well, I really want to be in New York City and I really want to work in television and, do comedy. And she said, well, I know someone who works at VH1. I can help you get an interview for an internship. And so I did a summer internship in New York City at VH1 the summer before my senior year at Dickinson. And I loved it. I worked really hard, and I truly was so delusional that when they were looking for a production assistant in the department I was working in, I was like, well, one of my roommates that I'm living with in New York, she would be great. I was an intern recommending someone for a job. How dare I? But they took the recommendation. They hired her. and she worked as a production assistant at VH1 for the 10 months that I was back at Dickinson. And then when she got promoted, they hired me. So I truly owe Dickinson my career, and I owe Amy the start of my career. So I started working in VH1's News and Red Carpet department, which meant I did a lot of red carpet interviews. I went to every fashion week, every music festival, every American Idol finale, all of that stuff. I did that for a long time. And at the same time, I was always taking improv and sketch classes and really got interested in writing. And as I moved up the ladder as a producer at VH1, and the way that the shows work there, as a producer, you tend to write a lot. And you usually write out what you think the script should be, and then you hand it off to the writers and they fix it and punch it up. And so one of the writers, the staff writer, pulled me aside one day and he said, you know, we never have to punch up your scripts. Have you ever thought of being a writer? And I was like, well, no, because the only two writers here are two white men and they're both 47. So like I'm 23. So I did not actually see that for my plan for my life. But that really helped me sort of realize, oh, I'm being seen. And it was very generous of the head writer at the channel at the time to really call that to my attention. So I kept producing, I kept writing, kept aiming towards writing. And then my first writing job was on a reboot of the show Best Week Ever on VH1. After that, I went to do some other shows on Bravo, like Fashion Queens and Watch What Happens Live. And I, a couple years ago, left Watch What Happens Live, which I loved very much, to do my dream job, which was writing as a staff writer on a show called The Rundown with Robin Thede on BET. And halfway through the season as a staff writer, I became the head writer of the show, which was crazy. I left work one day as a staff writer, went the next day as a head writer. And when that show got canceled, as many shows do, I stayed in New York and I got a call from Robin Thede, and she said, I created the show. HBO is going to do it. It's called a Black Lady Sketch Show, but you have to move to LA. And I was like, I hate LA, but I will do that. And so I came here to LA, and I still lived in New York. And so my wife and my dog were still in New York. I came here and did season 1 of the show. And I was used to doing one and done shows. So I was very excited when the show got picked up for season 2. So I moved here, and I've been living here for about 2 years. And the show is really important to me. I love sketch. I love working on such a cinematic show. I love the people that I work with. I love working on a show where you can tell these really cool, funny stories that have a full story arc in anywhere between 2 to 5 minutes. And my bread and butter is comedy. And that's what I am technically working on now, but we clearly can't shoot anything because of the pandemic. So that's it.
Now, will you start shooting again this week? Are you guys at that? Okay, so it'll be a little while yet.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's like actually a good transition. I'm going to have Alex go next because you share, the passion for the comedy niche in writing. So Alex, why don't you tell us a little bit about your Dickinson story and your career so far?
Great. Okay. Bear with me. I wrote down, as a writer, I wrote down my thoughts. So first of all, I want to thank everyone for traveling so far to be here tonight, from your bedrooms all the way to your living rooms and vice versa. But I was a dramatic arts major under the tutelage of the great mustachioed Todd Ronsky, who I know is still at Dickinson, who once told me that the secret to great acting is a great set of eyebrows. And then he did that, and he had eyebrows. I'm sure he still does, as big as his mustache. So
very on brand.
Anyway, and I also studied literature, and so I sort of got a hand in hand of great storytelling and learning about acting, and so I think it helped me learn about acting, directing. We covered the gamut, stagecraft, everything, and so I was able to sort of get to know characters inside and outside. and in a preliminary way that was really helpful, before coming out here. At Dickinson, I was a mermaid player, and a member of the Phi Kappa Psi fraternity, and on the baseball team. And we actually won a game while I was on the team. So anyway, but so, I feel like the liberal arts education there, small school, was perfect for me because I could have a diversified campus experience, and be involved in a lot of things that I wouldn't be able to be involved in at a huge university. My best friend went to Wisconsin, and he was constantly, shaving his head for the football games, painting his face, and it seemed to be like that's all he kind of did. It's fun once in a while, but not every day. So but yeah, I loved being able to be in plays and play ball, and so it's sort of, I feel like I got a really full education there that that I maybe wouldn't have gotten at a bigger school. So I originally came out to LA to be an actor, and I ran the gamut. I was taking classes, directing, improv, stand-up comedy. I did stand-up comedy for a long time. Really put myself through the ringer of educating myself in all these different things, trying to find out what exactly I was supposed to do, but all the while kind of being like, obsessed with writing. And I even did I even did a billboard for Lee Jeans once, where I was dressed as a coal miner in a pair of polka dot underwear. It was actually up. My friends were like at restaurants looking at. So I mean, I really had the full like early education of Los Angeles. What am I doing? What am I going to be? And then eventually I was writing. I was like writing 2 or 3 hours a day, and then it grew to like 6 hours a day. And I found out that I was able to turn like any pain into comedy, and that was this drug of like being able to get through whatever painful moment I'd had, a breakup or whatever, and put it into humorous terms, and then get rid of it. And that, that for me was very important. And then currently I'm working on I'm producing a pilot called Hostel Hollywood. Hostel as in youth hostel. And I'm working on the follow-up to my novel right here, Oh Jackie, called Oh Hemingway. And it's part of a trilogy, Oh Jackie, Oh Hemingway, Oh Hollywood. It's basically a guy who is obsessed with different people in history, and so he completely transforms himself right now into Hemingway, goes to Paris and lives pretty much the events that happened to Hemingway in this screenplay that he's writing. So he can, so to add texture and dynamics to the writing. He's kind of a crazy man, but a very hardworking crazy man. So that's what I'm working on now, and so please check it out. I'd love you guys to let me know what you think. Oh Jackie.
Great. Awesome. Thanks, Alex. Ed, why don't you share a little bit about your Dickinson story and what brought you to LA and what you've been doing since?
Gosh, I should have written this down like Alex did, but I'll just riff. I think my story is probably a little different than how most traditional students come, or definitely stories that you don't hear much on campus. So I grew up in the Lower East Side, New York, Lower East Side, housing projects and all that. And in high school, my guidance counselor suggested I go to community college. Didn't even suggest that I go to a 4-year college, went to a community college. And at that community college, I met another counselor that said, "Why are you here? Because you're a straight A student." And I said, I went, by the way, that high school is now shut down because it was so poor, so bad. But he said, "You're better than that. You should be achieving and going higher than that." And I said, "You're right. And where should I go?" Now, when I was little, I used to be involved in this program called the Fresh Air Fund. And it was taking a kid from the inner city and sending him out to the countryside to live. And my parents, who never wanted me to be in New York City during summer where all bad things happen, you know, when you're out of school and it's 100 degrees, she said, send you out to the countryside. And it was close to Dickinson College. So as an adult, I remembered that campus walking around as a little kid, and the Washington Redskins used to train there. So I said, I'd like to go to that college. It's the 90s. There's so many black people here because the Redskins were on campus. Let me go there. And I transferred in January. There's no play fair. There's no orientation. And I'm with my tray going into the cafeteria. And I was like, what just happened? Where did all the black people go? So it was like a curve where I had to figure out how to sort of fit in and make my way into Dickinson. So if you went to the coffee house, you saw me pouring coffee. If you were at the concert committee, I was at the concert committee. I was in speech and debate. I was joining every organization, everything to sort of fit in and find friends. And then I started finding a path through acting. I didn't join the Mermaid Players. I never made Run With It. They didn't want me, but I kept going, and I really started taking to the English department and my professors there, and started writing short stories and little things. And then I said I wanted to write a book, and they said, well, you can't write and my roommate, I was in a fraternity, which is, I think they're all gone, but I was in a fraternity. My roommate said I wrote a screenplay as an independent study with, guess who, our favorite mustached friend, Professor Ronsky. And he said, why don't you take your book and write it as a script? And I knocked on Professor Ronsky's door. He never, I don't think I had a class with him at that point, but I said, can I do an independent study with you? He said, yes. We'll come up with your own syllabus. We'll meet once a week and we'll go over your pages. And I took those pages and I entered in the Coles Fellowship, and I made it in the semifinals. And I thought, if my first draft of my first script got that far, maybe there's something that I can keep working on and developing, and that is sort of where it started. I was, you know, sending 25 letters a week to agents and stuff. I had my letters ready to go and entering contests and all that. And then flash forward outside of Dickinson, and a few years later, I started meeting people and started meeting friends in the industry, because I lived in New York, and I would just sort of hand in my script, would you read it? And a friend read it, and he gave it to an agent, and the agent sort of believed in me, and that's kind of where I started, and went to NYU for my MFA and came out to Hollywood. And like Lauren, I was like, I don't want to be here. But after a while, I was like, well, you can have a margarita in December outside, so maybe that's not that bad. So I kind of stayed, and first couple scripts, I sold a script to Paramount, which is this post-apocalyptic, they're never gonna make $100 million movie. I'll just write this crazy idea, and they bought it. And I was in the Marvel Writers Program. So while the woman next door to me, my friend Nicole, was writing Guardians of the Galaxy, I was developing Luke Cage. And they didn't do anything with the script, but when I had a general meeting with this woman named Melissa Rosenberg about Melissa Rosenberg wrote a script called wrote the Twilight series, and she was starting a new book. And I asked her, why didn't she want to write the book? She says, well, I'm doing this TV show called Jessica Jones. And I just said off the top of my head, oh, that's Luke Cage's wife, because I knew in the total universe, Luke and Jessica Jones get married. And she said, well, he knows the universe, let's bring him on. And that was like my first writing job on the show, and that was like my beginning in TV. And then the screenplays that I sold, I was selling, and then now you see me which I wrote living in New York, watching the bailouts that happened around 2008, where people would go in parachutes. And I sort of wrote this sort of high story and this comeuppance of big corporations and business that were stealing. Of course, Hollywood made it a little more fun and poppier and all that stuff, but that was the beginning. And then once I got into Hollywood, once I got my foot in the door, and then started to realize the quality of jobs that were out there and the different hurdles of being a Black writer in this business. I'll just take a second to explain. The difficulty sometimes being in TV is your agent can tell you, hey, Fox has a show and they're looking for a diversity hire. And then you're like, what is a diversity hire? Or they're looking for a Black person. Because what happens is the studio will pay for a Black writer to be on the show, which is basically a free added body in the room. But then what the perception could be is, well, you didn't earn your spot in the room. You're in here because of the color of your skin. And I avoided that because I felt like in the screenplay world, it was about the script and you never saw my face. And the TV room felt a little different. So I was slow to evolve with that. But it also made me think I wanted to work with people. How long have I talked? Have I talked too long? It also made me realize who I wanted to work with and what stories I wanted to tell. And I started, well, the speaker the year before me, David Yellowo, we linked up and he became a friend of mine and we started working on projects. And then he introduced me to his friend, Ava DuVernay. And then now we're writing 2 projects together. And then I started realizing that these were some of the people that were engaged and enthusiastic about the same stories, the same storytelling, heightening characters that we don't usually see on TV and film. And that's kind of where I am, particularly today, is what are stories that are meaningful to me. I think there's always room for popcorn and fun and action, and I like to write it and I like to enjoy it. But I also felt like now that we have ears of the world listening, what are the stories that we're telling that can impact those people, that is fun and fulfilling to me and all of that as I raise a 5-year-old daughter in this world, and what are the images I put out. So that's sort of where I am now.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we'll come back to some of the, I have so many follow-up questions I want to ask, but we'll get there. Eric, how about you? Tell us about your Dickinson experience, what brought you to LA, and what you've been working on since you moved there.
Gladly. Thank you for having me and for really honoring what we do, what me and my colleagues here do. I'm originally from Pittsburgh, and I'm a writer, producer, and a TV showrunner. And a few years ago, I created my own show for Nickelodeon called Super Ninjas. And most recently, I worked at Netflix on a show called Alexa and Katie, which I'm really happy to say was recently nominated for an Emmy. It's my 2nd Emmy nomination. The first one was for an adult animated show I did called Afro Samurai. At Dickinson, I really took the whole liberal arts education to heart. And I studied really a ton of history, a lot of philosophy and religion. I studied abroad in Florence, and I loved all of it. And after 4 years, I basically ended up with a major in the fine arts with a concentration in painting. And but you know, when I graduated, I really did not have a good plan. You know what I mean? But I just had this really deep and passionate interest in culture. And nothing else made any sense to me. And everything else was really kind of dreadful. And I suffered. I suffered because I was looking for a purpose. I suffered because I was looking for meaning and looking for a way to support myself. And finally, I reached that point when you realize that you have nothing to lose except your whole life. And so I packed up my car and I drove across the country. I know it's a horrible cliche, but a lot of us have done it. And when I got to LA, you know, I kind of suffered some more. But I got into the mix. I got into the whole culture of Hollywood. I got to the right parties, and I kind of started to speak the language. And finally, I got myself over to Disney, where I was working as an assistant to some executive producers of an animated show. And during that show, I just started pitching ideas to my bosses, because it's like, you see what's going on there and you're like, I have an idea. How about this? And, sometimes these guys, they just took the idea and assigned it to one of the writers that they had. But I just kept pitching them. And after a while, maybe they felt guilty because they were taking all of my ideas for free. And then they paired me up with one of the senior writers. And that's how I got my first writing credit. And from then on, I really started writing, with a purpose. And right now, I kind of have a big slate of projects that I'm currently working on, because, the market in Hollywood is constantly changing. And you kind of never know what those movie gods are going to want. But just quickly, I'm developing like a 1-hour historical epic, kind of with a supernatural bent. So it kind of has like a little bit of a Game of Thrones feel to it. I'm doing that with the French company called Gaumont and Vin Diesel's company. I have a half-hour dramedy based on a book by Richard Murray. He wrote The 100-Foot Journey. I don't know if you guys know it, but that was made into a movie with Helen Mirren. I have a half-hour family show with Nickelodeon, and a half-hour action comedy with Lucky Chap, which is Margot Robbie's production company. And literally, of course, I have like, 100 other notions at various stages. And if they're lucky, maybe they will grow up to be TV shows or movies one day too.
Wow. It's
It's
just
funny, in the small world of it all, you said you worked on Afro Samurai, the TV show. I was attached to do Afro Samurai, the movie. Which is still going nowhere, because
Yeah, they're still trying to sell that, yes.
Hollywood and all that. But it was supposed to be with Michael B. Jordan in the role. Afro Samurai.
Well, Sam Jackson wanted to do it for a while, for sure, as well. So it is, yes.
That was 2 years ago, so I just stopped asking what's going on. I'm just like moving on. But, Hollywood is slow.
Well, I would think especially these days. Thank you all for sharing. It's just your body of work. It's just, it's amazing to just think about all the projects you've all worked on, and all of your different Dickinson experiences that brought you out to LA and into the industry. So moving on, the next question I have for everyone is, based on your experience in writing, producing, what do you all think makes a story compelling? So we're going to get a little philosophical here. So I'll give you about 2 or 3 minutes each. I would love for everyone to answer if you're willing. Alex, would you be willing to start us off on this one? What do you think makes a story compelling? And then we'll just go clockwise.
Again, back to my favorite writer, Ernest Hemingway. I think his advice is the best advice, to write about what you know. And I've tried to stick to that in everything that I write. If you, like me, you love baseball, you've watched baseball, you've played baseball, you know everything there is to know about baseball, write about a baseball player, or whatever your interests are. But I would also say that you could take it one step further and write about what you've lived. And I've done both. I've tried to create stories from scratch and just make things up completely out of the air versus, taking actual things that have happened to me. My wife and I wrote a short story called Uber Trouble. And my wife and I got into an Uber with a guy who was drugged out and suicidal. And we had to get from about a 20-minute drive from where we had dinner home. And he was talking about, how he wanted to kill himself, his mom, he had police officers were staring in his window at night. And we're like, oh my gosh, this could be it for us. And so the rich detail of having been in that moment and gone through it. And then what was really cool about that moment actually was that we got home and there was a moment where my wife and I both had this feeling of like, I was like, oh my God, maybe we need to call Uber and say, because the next people may get it, right? And my wife was like, yeah, but maybe he was able to, you know, get whatever it was out of his system by talking to us. We were, you know, we were there for him in this moment. Maybe if we, you know, report him, it'll make it worse and he'll spiral even more out of control. And she won the coin toss on that one. But it made for a really gripping ending where it was like, well, how do we handle this? And it made for a little tension in our relationship. And so I could, you know, so it's like you can paint those pictures so much more clearly when you were actually been, you know, seatbelted into that moment. So, you know, so I think that's one thing that I think if you, you know, if you've, you know, met the people, you spent time with them, you know, friends and family are really good material, obviously, but, you know, don't forget that they'll recognize themselves, you know, in your work, and they may be talented at getting back at you. So there's that, you know, there's that worry as well. I actually had, when I wrote this book, I had one friend who was mad at me because he wasn't in it, and one friend who was mad at me because he was. So you have to be a little careful on, you know, what you share and what you do. But I mean, for me, it's that tone of like, you know, genuine authenticity is just makes the layers of the story a little stronger, I think. So I think as far as you know, authenticity, that's a good way to go. Write about what you know, write about the real people around you, write about the things you care most about. But also like a painter, make sure that you use the whole palette, you know, make sure that you connect with everyone out there, that it's, you know, it represents the interests of everybody. And, you know, so make sure that you cover all, you know, races, sexual orientations, personalities. I think it's really important to be representative, you know, especially in this day of everyone, inclusive. So yes, write about what you want to write about, but also, you know, make sure that it's interesting to everyone. I think it'd be the best advice as far as compelling.
Great,
So.
thank you. Ed, what do you think makes a compelling story?
Well, I know that me and my colleagues here could talk forever about this topic, and you can give us 2 or 3 minutes. But in 2 words, I'm going to say character and spectacle, because we're talking about entertainment writing here. And I really think that like a really good story satisfies like a really deep psychological need. You know, something that satisfies you, but that you didn't even necessarily know that you needed. You know, because narrative is really kind of like, it's a human instinct. You know, we all want to make sense of the world, make sense of events. And as we all know from kind of like our lives and from recent events, you know, change is really hard. But I think what a really good story, a compelling story, kind of gives that feeling of transformation. You know, I mean, the transformation of a character. And you know, like if you're all fans of Ray Dalio, a billionaire hedge fund manager, he says basically that everything is a machine. And so like in a story, you kind of go into it a certain way, and then you come out, you know, different on the other side. You mean you get that experience of that transformation. And of course, you know, the story, like in the entertainment business, you know, you want it to be relevant. You know, I mean, it needs to find an audience. It has to speak to that current audience that's out there. And that's a lot about, you know, what we talk about as being in the zeitgeist. You know what I mean? There's something subconscious about that. It's out there, but it isn't quite realized yet. And I really think that a great story is one of those things that's really a marriage between the audience and the story itself. And Aristotle in his Poetics always talks about spectacle. And I'm always thinking about, especially in entertainment, it's just like I'm always thinking about that spectacle, because that's how you sell things. And human beings, you know what I mean, no matter how good the story is, they kind of need a good reason to pay attention. And so it's like finding what that reason is in your current climate to, you know, to tell that story, to reach that audience, and to sell that story.
Thank you. Lauren, what do you think makes story compelling? And I would sort of extend that question to also say, you know, given your experience, what makes late night compelling? What makes comedy? What makes sketch compelling?
To me, my number one rule is that I always write to thrill myself, because the things that I like to see, the worst feeling I think as a writer is if you do something and you think, oh, if I didn't make this, would anyone miss it? Like, is it adding anything to the conversation? And usually the answer is no, when it doesn't feel like it comes from like a real place. And so for me, the things that I have found to be successful for sketch and comedy is that, like, you know, the saying goes that there's, you know, truth in comedy. And so the thing that makes our bodies make that physical laughter sound is usually like recognizing you have to know what is true and what is real to understand what's absurd. And so I always like go to my well of like experiences. What experiences made an impact on me? So for example, I wrote a sketch for the show that I work on called No Makeup, and it was basically about, it was from my experiences of my whole life as a woman. If I didn't have my hair done or makeup on, people would be like, are you okay? Or are you sick? And I just thought that was I'd be like, no, I just don't have on makeup. Like, I'm fine. So I wrote a sketch about a woman who literally dies over the course of a work day just because she doesn't have makeup on, in this sort of like surreal moment. So she like looks like a zombie. She ends up like on a stretcher, and then she codes, and then she puts makeup on and she's alive. And so that sketch is very absurd and very, you know, unrealistic and broad, but it's from that very real place of that experience. And I wrote it because I was like, that is funny to me. And all of the, you know, the comments on YouTube where people come up to me and they're like, that sketch like is my life. And it's because I took something that was real for me, and if by happy accident, it was also real for other people. And so I think that what is just so compelling about the stories and the work that everyone is mentioning here, it always comes from a place of passion, where it's like, I love history, I love baseball, I want to make stories that my daughter can be proud of. It comes from that internal amazing place. And that's why, like, you know, because this business is so crazy and weird and fickle, that, like, you know, you have to know who you are to handle the ups and downs of it. And I think the exercise of creating really helps you get very comfortable with who you are. And so I always try to put part of who I am in a funny way, in a compelling way, into the stuff that I do, because I do it for me, and because I'm like, if I don't like it, nobody's gonna like it. So I better like it.
Awesome. Thank you. Ed, care to weigh in on what you think makes a story compelling?
I always feel like, well, I kind of have the sort of the opposite experience of Alex, where I am driven by the passion of the project and all that, but sometimes I gravitate to things I'm just curious about, that I have a question for. Like when Now You See Me, I was just seeing people coming out of Bear Stearns and all these financial businesses with their boxes and their lives in their hands, but also $100 million checks. And I was like, and I just had a silly question. I was like, well, what if a bunch of magicians, if they formed together and had like a superhero group and stopped, what would they do? And then the question led to more questions. What if they robbed a bank, but it wasn't about the money? And then I wanted to take it in a different direction. But then going through that process and asking questions, and then using my sort of world experience, the experience I see around me to sort of answer it, I sort of come up with this sort of thesis that's sort of separate from my own life experience. Sometimes I think maybe it's just living in New York and just seeing like 200 episodes of Law and Order and straight out the books. Like, I wanted to escape in my stories, and sometimes escape means going into worlds that I didn't know much about. But that was sort of my escapism for me. But I feel like in terms of how to reach a story to an audience, I think about the specificity of your characters and what they're going through. Like, I think about how Kendrick Lamar can reach people in the suburbs. and it's what he's saying that translates from Compton to some kids in Ohio or Pennsylvania. It's like, I'm down with Kendrick. I understand his message and all that. Like, I would tell people, I like Bruce Springsteen growing up. I was like, Springsteen? Like what? But I'm like Born to Run, leaving your town, searching for that better life, getting on your motorcycle. Like I could see myself growing up in a project building, hearing Springsteen and thinking, I have those same feelings. I want to get on a motorcycle or the M15 bus and get out of my neighborhood and search for that better thing. So I just love that you can have singers from Compton or singers from Inglewood, New Jersey, and they're writing very specific things about their lives, but it's so specific, and they've painted such an interesting tapestry of that world that it translates to other people. And I try to do that. Like, how can I tell a story where my 10 friends from the neighborhood just won't like it, but I can affect people who don't either agree with my politics or don't agree with. I mean, that's the great thing about it, is when you go to a theater, you're in a movie theater with people that believe different things than you, that don't trust the same things in you, but they've all invested 2 hours of their life to hear what you've got to say in this story. And I think that's just a magical power that we all have, and the responsibility that we have with it. So my thing is, how can I be specific enough that people can sort of latch onto that story and it resonates to them?
Wow, thank you. So, you have a compelling story. You've written something that you're passionate about, that the world needs, that you believe people will connect with this material. My next question for you is, and this can be the struggle people talk about time and time again when I meet with them in LA in this industry, how do you take that, piece of art and get it out there to a broader audience, And so I want you to just take that question wherever you want to go with it, whether it's breaking into the industry or, making your voice heard in the entertainment world, wherever you want to go with that. How do you get that story out to a broader audience? Eric, why don't you kick us off?
Sure. Well, another huge topic. The entertainment business is really its own beast, you know what I mean? But it is a business, and believe it or not, it's actually really difficult to get people to read. It takes work, you know what I mean? Like even your own agent, will not read, material that you've written, you know what I mean? But you have to find. There's two things, there's they always say, there's when you make a movie, there's making the movie and then there's the selling of the movie. And the screenplay is very much the same thing. There's the writing of your screenplay or your TV pilot or whatever, and then they're selling it. They're two huge, huge components, and there's only it takes a lot of money to make something, obviously in the way that we visualize it. And you have to find the money. And there's only so many people who have that money. You know what I mean? The system of Hollywood, all these networks and studios, like they have money and they have like a system for getting that money together. So those people who make those decisions are called development executives, and they make those decisions on what is the good material and what are the ones that they need to make. And so you have to get it to those kind of people, and you get to those kind of people sometimes through friendships, sometimes through your agent, sometimes through I don't know, just like it's any way possible, really. You know what I mean? Because it takes a lot of passion to get through, to break through, because there's a lot of stories out there that I know are good, but that are not maybe marketable. And that's another component. It's like, your story needs to somehow be marketable, because ultimately people will want to read your material if it is something that that can help them. You know what I mean? They will read it if it can sell. They will read it if they can make money on it. Like if it's a horror script, it's like, oh, can I, that's a good genre for making money. It's very consistent. It's kind of a low barrier of entry. they're making them all the time. You know what I mean? The more rarefied things are more difficult. You know what I mean? If we want to do kind of stories that are, you know, true stories and everyone fighting for LGBT rights, civil rights, you know, whatever those stories are, they're harder to get made. You know what I mean? Because they are just not as, you know, they're not as commercial as a Marvel movie. You know what I mean? And so people want to make money. But of course, there's other people whose mission is to make content that changes people. And so it's about finding, you know, knowing what your material is and finding those right avenues to get there. And once again, it comes back to, you know, does your piece have spectacle? Is it relevant? And, you know, you need to be able to pitch that story in just a few sentences in a way that gets people interested enough to take a couple hours to read it before it can kind of like move through that Hollywood system. Other than that, you know, it's like, you know, find your rich friends and ask them for $30 million.
Sounds super easy. No big deal. Lauren, what are your thoughts on this and getting your work out to a broader audience?
I mean, I just echo everything Eric said. There's really no one way or right answer. It just really just depends on timing. It depends on where you are in your career. I think Eric put it so perfectly that like ultimately the thing that drives the business is money and the fact that people will, it's a risk management business. So, you know, it depends on who you are at the time that you are in the business. So like someone like Ava DuVernay, for example, 15 years ago, if someone says Ava DuVernay wants you to read the script, they would say, okay, well, maybe I'll get to it. Today, it's getting read today and it's getting bought today. So it really just depends on what you've done in your career, where you are in the moment in your career, where the business is in the moment. It's like a completely unpredictable, unknowable quantity. And that's why I always talk about like, I only want to do things that I deeply care about, because I'm not going to get my emotions taken from A to Z every other day for something that I'm tepid on. So that's the real struggle in the business, and making sure that you're doing things that are worth the, you know, the ebbs and flows and the unpredictabilities of the business.
Great, thanks. Alex, you're sort of living this right now as you're in the midst of getting a pilot into production. What's that been like?
Well, I think what Eric said is absolutely, you know, people are enjoying reading less. So I think it's like, you know, they like to look at videos and clips and things. That's sort of the entertainment these days. So yeah, it's a great point. It really is hard to get people to sit down and read your stuff, and it takes a long time. You have to be patient. You have to, you know, keep needling them to do it, but persistence. And I mean, I think the most important thing for people starting out, which it took me so long to learn, is just the value. The number one thing is networking, and it really did take me a long time to figure that out. I lost probably years on that, just because you know, you don't realize that you need to, you know, that, you know, you can't hide away in your attic, you know, and think that the masses are going to discover you there. You know, it worked for Emily Dickinson, but it's not going to work for everybody. But, you know, so I think that's big. I mean, these days, right? The social media presence, you know, the Facebook, the Instagram, Twitter. You know, you've got a tweet and TikTok, whatever that is, and just make sure that you get to as many people as you can, because it's getting to the person who has the same interest in storytelling as you, sometimes the same background. You know, for Jackie, I found a guy who went to Temple University, where my parents went to publish it. And he was like my age. It was, you know, he was interested in the Kennedys. It was just a beautiful alliance. But you know, it took so long to find that person that has your same values. So I think, you know, success in numbers is a big thing. Just, you know, get it out there as much as you can, and make as many contacts, and you know, and be a good friend to those people. Don't you know, help those friends in high places along, you know, the way you'd hope that they would help you along. You know, I think that's a really important lesson. But I think, you know, contacts is the number one thing to getting anywhere. You can work as many hours a day at writing great stories, but you need allies in this business. It's a tough business. It's tougher than you think, you know. I've been at this a long time, you know, and it really is, you know, you got to be in it for the love of it. I love to write. I love nothing more than writing. I used to love baseball, you know, a lot. I love nothing more than writing, so more than baseball. But I think that really, for anyone, just, you know, do the networking, and get yourself out there. Get yourself out there. It's so essential early on. So.
Great, thank you. Ed, getting your stories out to a broader audience.
Yeah. Is the question how to get our stories out as a beginning step as a writer?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty open-ended, but you know, once you know you have a good story, you know, how do you go about either getting that story made? You know, it could be about that. Yeah, the networking.
I would talk a little bit about that first sentence. Once you know you have a story that's good, and that to me is the most important part. Just going back to my own personal experience, I was so ready to go. I was like, read my first draft and all that other stuff, and what it is screenwrite. All the ladies and gentlemen on here and writers out here, the screenwriting is a craft that I'm still learning, that we're all still learning. And if the first script you write is great, then you're like a prodigy, you know, because most people aren't writing the first script is not going to win an Oscar, but it's something that you learn. And I think the best things to do to prepare yourself is to read. You don't have to go to NYU or college. You have the blacklist that's out there. Franklin Leonard has a blacklist where every year he has an annual list, which he releases, and then I devour all the scripts, but he also has a day-to-day website for people who can log on their scripts and get critiqued. These are things that didn't exist when I was coming up. I just had to sort of, you know, send letters out or enter a single contest, but really invest in yourself. Austin Film Festival is a great festival for screenwriters. Enter contests, enter festivals, read as many scripts as you can, and eventually you'll start to pick the rhythm and flow of those scripts, and then you'll start to formulate your own voice, because you've read Sorkin's voice and Spike Lee's voice and all the other voices, and then you're going to create your own voice. And then I think you show it. Everybody send your scripts to Alex, because he's gonna read it and send it to his manager. But no, you send you because when you have that moment where you show it to Eric, Lauren, and myself, you only have one chance to really make that impression. Or every script you send me after that, I'm gonna think it's on the level of that first one. So when you have that opportunity to go to Austin or go these places, show your script, intern at places, volunteer at places. In New York, I used to just volunteer at every theater I liked, just to be around the actors and the playwrights, and just know that it is not, if it takes a while. The average screenwriter doesn't sell their first screenplay till 4 years after college or something like that. So you may not hit it off the tracks, but really have your craft ready so that when people read it, they say, wow, this guy acts like he's been writing for years. And the truth is, you have been writing for years, and you've been getting yourself prepared for that moment, that when an executive from Netflix sits at your table, you've been ready for that moment and you won't waste that opportunity. And I can't stress enough how it is to hone your craft. If you've written one great script, they'll want to know, what's the second one? Are you a one-hit wonder? So build that up, have that script ready and also have that second great idea in your back pocket so that they see you are good, but you also have longevity because you're an idea maker and you can continue to build besides that one script.
Thank you. Okay, so we're getting close to 9 o'clock. I want to just check with all 4 of our panelists. Are you all good to take an extra 10-15 minutes for questions? I want to respect your time. If anyone needs to hop off, that's perfectly fine.
It's only 6 o'clock here, so it's
Okay,
all as well.
I want to respect everyone's time tonight. Thank you. I just don't want to cut anyone short because I'm just enjoying this so much, and I'm sure the audience is as well. So we're going to take a few questions, and Andrew's going to help me out. Everyone can use their chat box feature to do that. But there's one last question that I had planned for the program. I'm going to ask you all to do something difficult, which is to condense your answer to something very short and sweet while people send in a few questions. So if you can, why don't you try to keep this to 1 or 2 sentences, just a little snippet. What advice would you share with someone who is interested in a career in the entertainment industry? What would be sort of your words of wisdom to them if you had to condense it down? And anyone who is ready to go can take this one first.
I'll just say you have to be adaptable. You have to be able to take notes, which are the thoughts on your script. And that's a huge thing for an artist. You know what I mean? Because it's your vision, and then somebody else is going to chime in on that. Because at the end of the day, this is a kind of a collaborative business. And everybody has an opinion and wants to be heard.
Thanks, Eric. Anyone else want to hop in? Words of wisdom?
I would say that what I find to be super important is to learn every aspect of the business. So if you want to write for TV, learn how a writer's room works, learn how a set works, learn as many aspects of your chosen or goal profession as you can, because that will help you be a better writer. It will help you be someone that people want to work with, and it will just help you understand what you're doing and how what you put on the page affects what happens on the screen and on the set.
I'd suggest taking an acting class. It's always sort of good to be in the heads of writers, just even like a couple, night classes to get in the rhythm, because you'll have questions of what is the purpose of the scene? What am I doing in this scene? So writers can sometimes have one agenda, and it's good to know who you're writing for in terms of seeing it from an actor's point of view.
Interesting.
Yeah, I would say, take a job at like a production office or something, a low-level job where you're, script reader or something, and you're reading, I think like Ed was saying, like, good scripts, bad scripts. So you learn the difference, and what to do and what not to do. But also you're making contacts there, and maybe, you can slip your script underneath the pile and, with your name spelled backwards or something. But I think that's, be willing to humble yourself to start, because you'll rise. You got time. So just be willing to take your time and start small and work big. Work your way up.
Great, thank you. All right, so my colleague Andrew Calnan, shout out, by the way, Andrew organized all of Alumni Week, which went virtual after he had planned most of it on campus. So I want to give a big thank you to Andrew, because in the midst of a pandemic, having to completely replan an event weekend, he did a great job. Andrew, any questions that have come in from our virtual audience tonight?
Yes, we've got a few questions, and thank you guys all for participating tonight. You're all wonderful. We have a few questions here. So the first one is from William, and he says, how raceless is Hollywood in terms of hiring writers? Anybody have any thoughts on that question?
Meaning?
How raceless is the hiring practices in Hollywood? I don't feel race as much as doing features, because most times scripts will come across a desk and it just says Edward Ricourt. They may not know my color and all these other, or race or. So I don't feel it that way in features, because I feel a little bit more anonymous. The passes are, yeah, that person you haven't met past or want to meet. But in TV, I do think that they're more cognizant of gender and race. Van Jones has a color of change, where he put out a report of diversity in writers' rooms and how we could be doing more and what rooms are doing better. So I think that has a bigger impact on TV than on film.
I think it really depends on also where you go. I mean, there's really the entire gamut, of it. I think that largely, this is a blanket statement, and I'm sure I'll get pilloried for it, but it's like, I feel like network writing, has less diversity than, like the cable and the streamers. And it's really a problem, to have gender diversity as well in all the rooms. And some people really make it a priority, and other rooms don't make it a priority at all. And so, yeah.
I found that in television, especially in comedy, people tend to, late night is a relatively new art form, and the way that TV is constantly evolving. So in the past, people like hosts or writers have been like, I want to hire my friends from my improv class, or my friends from my sketch class, or my friends from the Lampoon at Harvard. So they end up being, people's friends. So they end up being the same age, same race, same from the same region of the United States or whatever. Ed pointed out Color Change, which has a great report. And I think the Writers Guild came out with another one this week that talks about representation in writers' rooms. And I will say anecdotally, it's 2020, and I am the second Black woman to be the head writer of a late night show, and I'm the first Black woman to be the head writer of a sketch show. So that anecdotally, I would say that there definitely is, where I'm sure there you could count on 2 to 5 hands how many men or white men have been in those positions. So it really.
I can just share some statistics real quick. I'll just hand them. So Black TV writers represent 4.8% of TV writers. Asian writers represent 2.5%. And Latinx writers I do not have, but my experience is that it's quite low as well. Probably it could be lower than these two.
I think so, and I think Native writers is like 0.01%.
Exactly.
So, there are
women. Also, I mean, it's just like, I don't know what the percentage, but it is not 50%. It is well below 50%.
Yeah. And as the thing in TV too is that there are ranks in writers' rooms. So this first level is the staff writer, and the highest is showrunner. And so you have to also look at those numbers through the lens of like, how many of those women or people of color stay at the staff writer level, and how many of those women and people of color make it up to the showrunner level. So those numbers get smaller and smaller as you go up. And as Eric said, some people are more, inspired and feel more passionate about leveling the playing field and reaching beyond their immediate network to hire. And some people are not, but we are doing better and better every year, hopefully.
I think an unintended consequence, and for people who may not know, Hollywood is in the middle of a year-long writer's strike. There's a couple. I have an agent that signed the agreement, but there are places that are still struggling. But sort of the side effect of that is it's broken a little bit of that insulation that we have in this business, where it's always the same people that get called for job after job after job. And now the WGA has sort of a submission portal where new voices can submit their work and apply for jobs. And I've heard from a few showrunners that says, I've never heard of this female writer before. I've never heard of this Black person before, because the agent is just going through a list of their people that they need to service, and those other people never make that list. So it is trying to sort of find the sideways angle in to get to these people, because there are jobs to be had. We're in a business that's exploding now. This is a bit of the gold rush for writers, where you have Apple Plus and Disney Plus and HBO Max. There's new jobs, and I feel like a few years ago we had about 200 shows on air, and now we're over 300. So there's more jobs to be had, and there's opportunities, and it's just about access. So I think, in a weird way, this writer strike, and hopefully going forward with people like Michael B. Jordan, who I've done 2 seasons of a show he has, where he has something called an inclusion writer, which guarantees that the staff behind the support behind the camera, writers to people on set, will be broken down 50-50 to have more. But we need more people than Michael B. Jordan. We need the people that are hiring, people like Netflix and people like Hulu, to make access more available to people, where it's just not one little sliver of opportunity.
I remember that you mentioned in an Oscars speech. Was that last year or the year before?
I think the year before.
Yeah.
I would just say, if we're supposed to be the liberal-minded industry, and the numbers that Eric just put up are true, then we got a long, long way to go. I mean, that's pathetic, And I was just on Instagram last night, and they were talking about, having a female vice president, and I said, we've had 1 nominated female vice president on the Republican side and 1 on the Democratic side, right? So we're tied with the Republicans on how many women have been in a position to be VP or president. That's pathetic. So anyone that's saying Joe Biden, what is he doing, should take a real look at themselves, because that's pathetic. So hopefully this is a time that's helping things to change, so anyway.
As you were talking, I saw the number of attendees just drop a little bit.
I was trying not to go there, but I got that's not helping my case, I'm sure.
All right, let's take one more question, and then I'll wrap it up, and we'll keep these answers on the brief side.
All right, let me find another one to end on here. This one's great. This is from Haley. She says, could you describe a favorite moment you've experienced in your career? What has been that one moment that you'll never forget?
Great question.
And maybe you haven't had it yet.
I got a moment. I'll tell mine, and I hope I don't cry when I say it. But when I did Now You See Me, my mother was very sick, and the film was in post, and she was in the hospital, and it didn't look like she wasn't going to make the premiere. So the director slipped out a copy, and he could have got fired if he did it. He slipped out a copy of the movie that was still in post to an assistant who drove 40 miles to where we were out in Westlake Village, and the nurses rolled a big screen TV into the hospital room so my mother could see Now You See Me. And for me, the premiere and all the hoopla and all that stuff was nice, but the most meaningful moment for me, a kid growing up in the projects who just wanted to make sure his mother saw that, all her work was not for nothing. That was a special moment for me, just having her know that was a part of that, and also just the compassion of other people, the compassion of that director and all those people to say, hey, this writer was there for us, and we're a part of this family, and they were there for me and made my sort of wish come true for that my mother could see it. So that was special for me.
That's great, thanks.
And I didn't cry, so that's good.
It's okay if you do.
I would say for me, one of the best moments in my career so far happened when we were editing the first season of a Black Lady sketch show. And what people don't know, or think about when you watch TV is that like when you're a producer on television, like you of course write the scripts and are on set and all that stuff and you're in the edit, but you also have to literally make the credits of the show. So someone has to sit there and type all the positions and all of the names. And so we were screening like the first full cut, like final cut of an episode before the show even came out. And the card that said written by came up, and it said, and I have it right here, somebody framed it for me, but it had, you know, my name's the head writer, and then it had written by and just 7 Black women's names. And I'd never seen that before. And I sat there and I looked at the screen, and especially not on a sketch comedy show. And it had the HBO like little, you know, white fuzzy sound at the end. And I just like cried because I couldn't believe that I was seeing the names of my colleagues and my friends and my sisters in the writer's room, but also just, I saw myself as a young child watching Saturday Night Live, watching In Living Color, watching Mad TV, and never visualizing that moment. And so seeing that card that said written by Lauren, Robin, Amber, Akilah, Holly, Ashley, like that blew me away. And I just was like, this is why I do this job.
Alex?
Mine was years ago doing stand-up comedy, just starting out trying to do it. And I had a guy in the audience heckling me. This was just like a coffee shop somewhere in the valley kind of thing, heckling me. And
Sorry about that.
You know, yeah, that's all right. I said, well, if you think you can do better, you know, take the mic. And he said, okay. So I had no choice but to, you know, hand him the mic. And then, you know, he, not knowing how difficult stand-up comedy is, went up on stage and started telling a story about something that happened at the office, you know, that day. And I started heckling him.
Oh,
like I just went nuts. I mean, you know, running around the place, yelling stuff and everything. And then finally he said, all right, take it back, all right, fine. Like that. It just was this great moment of like turning the tables on some heckler that I'll never forget. It's my favorite thing that ever happened.
awesome. Yeah. Well, I have 2. I don't mean to be selfish, but I'm going to just tell you 2. And they are, my partner and I won the Writers Guild Award for our screenplay of our pilot for Super Ninjas. And look, you don't get into this for the award, and you don't get into it, you know, for that moment. But I have to tell you, it's pretty great. You know what I mean? And it's just like, especially because it's for writing, because that's what we're doing. And it's like, so, and just to be acknowledged by that, you know what I mean? You're like, there's such a great comfort and obviously a great joy. But then the other moment is actually different, because it's like, it was the 2nd or almost 3rd season of Super Ninjas, and we were doing our wrap party. And we shot the show in Pittsburgh, which is my hometown, and just giving my little speech and thanking all of those wonderful, wonderful people who worked on the show and who like worked so hard for the show to make it as good as they could. And just that appreciation in that moment was really, that was really the best moment.
I'll just add something to that, you know, just talking about, you know, the moment, you know, I've done three Netflix shows and spent, I don't know, you know, 8 to 10 months working on both of them on a show that drops all in one day, in one moment, and your 8 months of work is going to be debated, talked about, and by Sunday they're going to be promoting Stranger Things. So the moment that you worked 8 to 10 or even a year and a half for is gone in a flashpoint. So I would just my advice is enjoy the whole ride, enjoy the whole process, enjoy the time on the set working with the actors and the time in the writer's room working with other writers, because when it all goes away, that moment, unless you know, you're not on Netflix and maybe they're talking about it week to week and you can have that 20 weeks of week to week anticipation, but in this new model of binge watching, that moment goes by very fast. So really just enjoy all the steps of that ride, and you'll find that that ride was more fun than that weekend by yourself waiting to hear if people are watching or not. So just enjoy all of that.
Thank you. All right, so in the interest of time, we're going to close out very, very quickly. Do you all want to share where people can find you on social media, if you have a social media presence, and if you want to plug something you're working on now that's about to be released or come out, feel free to give a quick plug.
You can find me on LinkedIn. Send me an email. I'll answer you.
Great.
I'm on Instagram. I think it's just Edward Ricourt at Instagram. You know, everybody, if you're interested in writing, keep writing, keep reading. I'm working. I think the next thing is I'm doing a project with David Oyelowo, the biopic about Sugar Ray Robinson, boxer in the 50s and 60s. That he'll be shooting one day. So a lot of projects are on pause and a lot of writing, but that's the sort of the next thing to go. And it's fun working with David, and I hope you've all enjoyed your time here. Thanks for listening.
Yes, thank you for listening.
Yeah. You can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at MSLAS, and I'll just plug season 1 of A Black Lady Sketch Show, which is on HBO, probably on demand. It's on HBO Max as well. And especially in this time where a lot of people are stuck in their houses, the interstitial element of the first season is the 4 actors not able to leave the house. They're in quarantine. So that was prescient on our part. So watch that if you want to feel seen.
Thanks.
You can find me at alexandercarverwriter.com, samples of my work. And again, there's this book on Amazon, getting great reviews, and jnewbooks.com once again.
I'm gonna just show you what I keep up on my desk representing.
Oh.
My Dickinson College bottle opener. That's my one prop.
We appreciate that. Oh,
Good
well,
hanging
great.
out with all you guys. This was great.
Oh man, we're so proud of all of your accomplishments, of your creativity. And we know you don't have a chance to get back to campus as often because you're so many miles away. But for all of those of you who are in LA, we have a great alumni community in LA. And we do try to get together when it is safe to do so. We'll do that again. But I just want to thank these alumni. You're all just so accomplished and creative, and you're inspiring to us. So thank you for sharing your story, and you're very appreciated. We can't wait to see what you come up with next. That's all I have to say. So thank you
so much for having me, Andrea.
Thank you. The recording will be available, so if you want to listen after the fact or share with someone else, we will send you the link. And if you have more questions, we can try to get those to the panelists after the fact as well, if they have time. So thanks again, everyone.
Great, thank you.
See you guys.
Bye. Thanks, guys.
Bye, Smithsonians. Take care.